My son stood in my tiny apartment and laughed. "Mom, you're broke. You can't even afford a decent car." He didn't know that while he was mocking my old furniture and worn carpets, I had $12 million sitting in an account he'd never seen. For 20 years, I let him believe I was struggling. Let him think I needed his pity. Why? Because I wanted to see who he really was when he thought I had nothing. And what I discovered broke my heart. Before the story begins, subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. My name is Vivian. I'm 68 years old, and I've been running the longest, most painful test of my life. It started 5 years ago, on a Tuesday morning in March, the day my husband, Harold, died. We'd been married for 43 years. Harold was a quiet man, the kind who could sit in comfortable silence for hours, reading the newspaper or working on his crossword puzzles. Brilliant with numbers, terrible at small talk. He worked in finance for almost 4 decades. Investments, portfolio management, complicated things involving spreadsheets and market projections that made my head spin whenever he tried to explain them. We lived comfortably, not extravagantly. Never extravagantly. We had a nice 3-bedroom house in the suburbs with a yard Harold loved to tend on weekends. 2 cars, nothing fancy, but reliable. We took 1 vacation a year. Usually somewhere quiet, a beach town, the mountains, places where Harold could relax without feeling like he had to be on. I knew Harold made good money. His salary was respectable, and over the years he'd gotten promotions, bonuses, the usual progression of a successful career. But we never lived like wealthy people. We shopped at regular stores. We ate at chain restaurants. We drove our cars until they had over 100,000 miles on them. "Why spend money we don't need to spend?" Harold would say. "We have everything we need." And we did. We really did. I worked, too, for 30 years as a school secretary. It wasn't glamorous, but I loved it. I loved the kids, the teachers, the rhythm of the school year. My salary was modest, but it was mine, and it made me feel independent. Together, Harold and I built a good life, a simple life. We were happy. And then, on that Tuesday morning, Harold collapsed in the garage while getting ready for work. By the time the ambulance arrived, he was already gone. Massive heart attack. The paramedics said he probably didn't feel any pain, that he went quickly. But I felt everything. The funeral was small. Harold didn't have many friends. He was too quiet for that, but the people who came genuinely cared about him. Co-workers who respected him, neighbors who'd known us for years, and Trevor, of course, our son. Trevor was 42 at the time, married to Claudia for 8 years. They lived in the city, both working corporate jobs that seemed to consume their entire lives. Trevor did something in marketing that I never fully understood. Claudia worked in real estate, selling luxury condos to people with more money than sense, or so she'd joke at family dinners. They seemed happy, successful. They had a nice apartment, expensive clothes, and they took trips to places I'd only seen in magazines. They'd visit us once a month, sometimes less, always rushing, always checking their phones, always talking about how busy they were. After Harold's funeral, Trevor stayed with me for 3 days. He took time off work, something he rarely did, and he was attentive, made sure I ate, handled phone calls from the funeral home and the lawyer, sorted through paperwork I couldn't bring myself to look at. On the 3rd day, we sat at my kitchen table, the same table where Harold and I had eaten breakfast together for 30 years, and Trevor said something I didn't think much of at the time. "Mom, if you ever need help with money, let us know. Dad handled all the finances, right? So if you're not sure about bills or anything, Claudia and I can help." It was kind, thoughtful even, but something in the way he said it made me pause. The assumption in his voice, like he already knew I'd need him. "I'll be fine," I said. "Your father was organized. Everything's in order." Trevor nodded, but I saw the look in his eyes, that flicker of doubt, like he didn't quite believe me. That night, after Trevor left to go back to the city, I sat alone in the house that suddenly felt too big, too empty, too full of memories. I couldn't sleep. Every corner reminded me of Harold, his reading chair, his coffee mug still sitting on the counter, his shoes by the door. The next morning, I had an appointment with Harold's lawyer, a man named Richard Pemberton who'd handled our wills and estate planning years ago. I'd met him maybe twice. Harold always took care of that stuff. I sat in Mr. Pemberton's office, a box of tissues on my lap, expecting to hear about our modest savings account and the small life insurance policy Harold had through work. And then Mr. Pemberton opened a folder and slid a document across his desk. "Mrs. Vivian, your husband left very specific instructions. I'm going to walk you through everything, but first, I need you to look at this number." I looked. $12 million. I stared at the number, read it again and again. "I don't understand," I whispered. Mr. Pemberton smiled gently. "Your husband was an exceptionally talented investor. For over 30 years, he'd been carefully building a portfolio. He never touched it, never told anyone about it. He wanted it to grow quietly so that when the time came, you'd be taken care of. $12 million. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. The room started spinning. "He never said anything," I managed. "He didn't want to change how you lived," Mr. Pemberton said. "He told me once that he loved your life exactly as it was, simple, honest, real. He said money had a way of complicating things, and he didn't. Want that for you two." I started crying. Not sad tears, shock tears, overwhelmed tears. "There's something else," Mr. Pemberton said gently. He pulled out an envelope. "Harold left you a letter. He asked me to give it to you today." My hands shook as I opened it. The letter was short, written in Harold's careful, precise handwriting. "My dearest Vivian, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and I'm so sorry I'm not there with you. I hope I gave you a good life. I hope you know how much I loved you. By now, Richard has told you about the money. I know you're probably shocked, maybe even angry that I didn't tell you, but I had my reasons. I've spent my entire career watching what money does to people. I've seen it destroy families, turn good people greedy, make children resent their parents and spouses turn on each other. I didn't want that for us. I wanted us to live a life based on who we were, not what we had. But now that I'm gone, you need to be taken care of. Use this money wisely, Vivian. Live comfortably. Travel if you want. Do all the things we never did. But remember this, money reveals character, yours and everyone else's. Pay attention to how people treat you. Pay attention to who stays and who leaves. Pay attention to what people say when they think you have nothing versus what they say when they think you have everything. You'll learn more about the people in your life in the next year than you learned in the last 40. I love you, always. Harold. I read the letter 3 times, and with each reading, something shifted inside me. Money reveals character. I thought about Trevor. about the assumption in his voice, about how quickly he'd offered to help with finances. And I thought about Claudia, about how she'd looked around our house over the years, at our simple furniture and modest decorations, with a kind of polite pity. And I made a decision right there in Mr. Pemberton's office. I wouldn't tell anyone about the money, not yet, maybe not ever. I wanted to see what Harold meant. I wanted to understand what he'd been trying to tell me. "Mr. Pemberton," I said, "I need you to set up the account so no one can access it but me, and I need a financial advisor who can manage it quietly." He nodded slowly. "I can do that. May I ask why?" "Because I need to know who my son really is." Over the next few months, I dismantled my old life piece by piece. I sold the house, told Trevor it was too big, too full of memories, too expensive to maintain on my own. "Are you sure, Mom?" he asked when I told him. We were standing in the driveway looking at the "For Sale" sign the realtor had just planted in the front yard. "I'm sure. It's time." "But where will you go?" "I found a small apartment across town. 1 bedroom. It's all I need." Trevor's face shifted. Just slightly. A flicker of something I couldn't quite read. "Is it nice?" "It's fine. How much is the rent?" "I can afford it. With my pension." That flicker again. "Your pension? Mom, is money tight? Because Claudia and I'm fine," I said firmly. "Really, your father and I lived simply. My pension is enough." It wasn't technically a lie. My pension was enough to live on, barely. But I let Trevor fill in the blanks. Let him assume what he wanted to assume. The house sold quickly. I moved into a 1-bedroom apartment in an older building on the edge of town. The carpet was worn. The kitchen was tiny. There was one small window in the living room that looked out onto a parking lot. It was nothing like the house Harold and I had shared. And that was the point. I furnished it with things from thrift stores. A sagging couch with faded floral upholstery, a kitchen table with mismatched chairs, dishes from Goodwill, curtains I'd found at a garage sale. I bought a 15-year-old Honda Civic with a dent in the passenger door and a broken radio. It cost me $800 cash. I started shopping at discount grocery stores, wearing clothes I'd had for years, cutting my own hair. I became, in every visible way, a struggling widow living on a fixed income. And I watched. I paid attention. Trevor noticed immediately. The first time he came to visit my new apartment, I saw it in his face. The shock, the pity, the barely concealed disappointment. "Mom," he said slowly, looking around, "this is small. It's enough for me." He walked through the tiny space. It took all of 30 seconds, and I watched his expression change with each step. The sagging couch, the chipped coffee mugs, the threadbare towels in the bathroom. "Are you sure you're okay here?" he asked. "I'm fine, honey, really. It's just, after the house, this is a big change. Change is good sometimes." But I could see he didn't believe me. Claudia didn't come with him that first visit. She was busy with a big sale, Trevor said, but she came the second time, about a month later. I'd made lunch, sandwiches and store-brand potato chips, nothing fancy. Claudia walked into my apartment in designer jeans and heels that probably cost more than my monthly rent. She looked around with barely disguised horror. "Vivian," she said, her smile tight, "this is cozy." Cozy. The word people use when they mean cramped. We sat at my small kitchen table, and I watched Claudia pick at her sandwich like she was afraid it might be contaminated. "How are you adjusting?" she asked. "Fine. It's actually nice to have less space to clean." She glanced around again. "Have you thought about... there are some really nice senior communities in the area. They're very affordable, much nicer than..." She gestured vaguely at my apartment. Senior communities. I was 63, healthy, active. "I'm not interested in a senior community," I said. "Of course," Claudia said quickly. "I just thought, with your pension and everything, it might be more comfortable." "With your pension?" Like she knew anything about my finances. Trevor jumped in. "Mom's fine, Claudia. She likes her independence." But even as he said it, I saw the doubt in his eyes. Over the following months, Trevor's visits changed. He started coming less often. Once a month became once every 6 weeks, then 2 months. When he did visit, he'd bring groceries, things I hadn't asked for. Expensive bread from the fancy market, organic vegetables, like he thought I couldn't afford to feed myself properly. "You don't have to do this," I'd say. "I want to," he'd reply. But I could see the pity in his eyes. He'd slip me money, too. $100 here, $50 there. Folded bills he'd leave on my kitchen counter for emergencies. I never spent them. I put them in an envelope in a drawer, a record of his assumptions. Claudia stopped coming entirely after that second visit. "She's swamped at work," Trevor would say. But I knew better. I'd seen the way she looked at my apartment, at my thrift store furniture, at me, like I was someone to be pitied, someone beneath her. A year passed, then 2. Trevor's calls became shorter, his visits more rushed. He'd check his watch, mention meetings, talk about his life, his promotion, his new car, the vacation he and Claudia were planning to Europe. He stopped asking about my life, stopped listening when I talked about my neighbors or the book I was reading. I was becoming invisible to him, or worse, I was becoming a burden, a problem to be managed. And then came the dinner invitation. 2 years after Harold's death, Trevor called and invited me to dinner at his place. "Claudia wants to cook," he said. "It's been too long." I knew what it was really about, but I went anyway. Their apartment was everything mine wasn't. Sleek, modern, expensive, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Furniture that looked like it belonged in a magazine. Art on the walls that probably cost more than my car. Claudia greeted me at the door with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Vivian, come in, come in." She'd made chicken piccata, set the table with cloth napkins and wine glasses, put on soft music. It was all very civilized, very polite, and completely fake. During dinner, Claudia asked about my situation. "How are you managing, Vivian? Financially, I mean." "I'm fine. It's just, Trevor mentioned your car is having problems, and your apartment building. I drove by the other day. It's in kind of a rough area." "It's fine." "We worry about you," she said, reaching across the table to pat my hand. "Being alone, at your age, in that neighborhood." At your age. I was 65, not 90. Trevor set down his fork. "Claudia and I have been talking about your living situation." My stomach tightened. "We think you should consider other options," Claudia continued. "There's this lovely assisted living community about an hour from here. They have activities, meals included, a nurse on staff, 24/7. Assisted living. They wanted to put me in a nursing home." "I don't need assisted living," I said calmly. "Mom," Trevor said gently, like he was talking to a child, "we just want what's best for you. You're alone. You're getting older. What if something happens? Nothing's going to happen. You don't know that, Claudia said. And honestly, Vivian, that apartment, it's not safe. The neighborhood isn't safe. We'd feel so much better knowing you were somewhere with security, with people around to help if you need it. Help? That word again. I don't need help. Everyone needs help sometimes, Claudia said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. I looked at Trevor, my son, the boy I'd raised, the man who was now sitting across from me, nodding along as his wife tried to convince me to give up my independence. I'm not moving into assisted living, I said firmly. Trevor's jaw tightened. Mom, be reasonable. I am being reasonable. I'm 65 years old. I'm healthy. I'm capable. And I'm not going anywhere. The rest of the dinner was tense, awkward. Claudia made small talk about work. Trevor checked his phone. When I left, Claudia hugged me and whispered, "Just think about it, okay? For us. For us. Not for me. For them. So they could stop worrying, stop feeling guilty, stop having to visit me in my rough neighborhood." 3 more years passed. Trevor's visits became even less frequent. Every few months, if I was lucky, he'd call on holidays, send generic birthday cards. Claudia never came at all. I kept living in my small apartment, kept driving my old car, kept wearing my thrift store clothes, and I kept watching, learning, seeing who my son really was when he thought I had nothing. Then, last year, everything came to a head. Trevor called on a Tuesday afternoon. I remember because Tuesdays were my grocery shopping days, and I'd just gotten home. Mom, Claudia and I need to come by this weekend. We need to talk to you about something important. My stomach dropped. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. We think it's time to have a serious conversation about your future. My future. Like it was theirs to decide. That Saturday, they showed up together at exactly 2 o'clock. Trevor was wearing a suit on a Saturday. Like this was a business meeting. Claudia had on expensive jeans, a silk blouse, and sunglasses that probably cost more than my monthly rent. They looked successful, polished, important. And I looked exactly like what I'd been pretending to be for 5 years. A struggling widow in worn clothes and sensible shoes. They sat on my sagging couch. I offered them coffee. They declined. There was a long, uncomfortable silence. Then Trevor cleared his throat. Mom, Claudia and I have been talking a lot about you, about your situation, and we're worried. I'm fine, I said automatically. You're not fine, Claudia interrupted. Vivian, look around. You've been living like this for 5 years, in this tiny apartment, barely scraping by. It's not right. It's my choice. Is it? Trevor leaned forward. Or are you just too proud to admit you need help? I don't need help. Yes, you do, Claudia said firmly, and we've found a solution. She pulled out a brochure from her purse. Glossy, colorful, photos of smiling elderly people playing cards and doing watercolors. Meadowbrook Senior Living, she said, handing it to me. It's about an hour from here. Beautiful facility. They have everything. Activities, meals, transportation, medical staff, and it's affordable. Your pension would cover most of it, and Trevor and I would help with the rest. I looked at the brochure, at the staged photos of happy seniors living in their little rooms with their little activities. You want me to move into a nursing home. It's not a nursing home, Trevor said quickly. It's independent living with support. It's a nursing home. Mom, please, just listen. Trevor ran his hand through his hair, something he did when he was frustrated. You've been living in denial for 5 years, pretending everything's fine when it's clearly not. This apartment is falling apart. Your car barely runs. You're alone all the time. You're not taking care of yourself. I'm taking care of myself just fine. You're 68 years old. His voice rose. You're not getting any younger. What happens when you fall? When you get sick? When your car finally dies and you can't afford to replace it? I'll figure it out. Claudia scoffed. With what money, Vivian? Your pension? That's barely enough to cover your rent. It's enough. It's not. Trevor stood up, pacing. Do you know how hard this is for us, watching you live like this, in this dump? Dump? He called my home, the home I'd chosen, the place I'd lived for 5 years. A dump. Trevor, Claudia said softly, putting a hand on his arm. Calm down. But Trevor was on a roll now. 5 years of frustration pouring out. You're broke, Mom. You can't even afford a decent car. Your furniture looks like it came from a garage sale. You shop at discount stores. You cut your own hair. You're living like you're homeless and you're too stubborn to admit you can't do this anymore. I sat there, absorbing every word, every insult, every assumption, every piece of concern that was really just contempt, and I felt something inside me break. Not sadness, not hurt, clarity. Pure crystalline clarity. The test was over. 5 years, and Trevor had failed spectacularly. Get out, I said quietly. Trevor stopped pacing. What? Get out of my home. Mom, now. Claudia stood, grabbing her purse. Vivian, if you'd just listen, get out. They left. Claudia muttering something about impossible and stubborn. Trevor slamming the door behind them, and I sat alone in my tiny apartment, surrounded by my garage sale furniture, and I cried. Not because Trevor had hurt me, but because I finally had my answer. Harold was right. Money does reveal character, and my son's character, when he thought I had nothing, was uglier than I'd ever imagined. I didn't hear from Trevor for 3 weeks after that. No calls, no texts, nothing. Part of me wondered if I'd ever hear from him again. Part of me didn't care. I spent those weeks thinking about Harold, about the letter he'd left me, about what the last 5 years had taught me. I thought about all the little moments I'd witnessed, the way Trevor's visits had become shorter, the way he'd stopped asking about my life, the way he looked at me, not with love, but with obligation tinged with embarrassment. I thought about Claudia's barely disguised disgust every time she came to my apartment, the way she talked about me to Trevor when she thought I couldn't hear. Your mother is being ridiculous. She's making this harder than it needs to be. We can't keep enabling her. Enabling, like I was an addict, like wanting to live independently in my own home was some kind of disease. And I thought about that final visit, that brochure, that suit Trevor wore like he was coming to a business meeting instead of talking to his mother, the way he called my home a dump, the way he looked at my life with pity and contempt. And I realized something. I didn't recognize my son anymore. Maybe I'd lost him years ago. Maybe I'd never really known him at all. Or maybe, and this was what hurt the most, maybe Trevor had always been this person. Maybe I'd just never had reason to see it before. On the 22nd day after that awful conversation, I made a decision. It was time to end the test. I called Mr. Pemberton, Harold's lawyer who'd been overseeing the management of the account for the past 5 years. Mrs. Vivian, he said warmly, "It's been a while. How are you?" "I'm ready," I said. There was a pause. "Ready for what?" "To tell Trevor the truth." Another pause, longer this time. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. Can you arrange a meeting? This Saturday at 2 o'clock, my apartment." "Of course." "Should I prepare documentation?" "Everything. The full account statement, the investment history, all of it." "I'll be there." Next, I called my financial advisor, Mr. Garrett. I'd never met him in person. All our interactions over the past 5 years had been over the phone or email, but Harold had trusted him completely, and I'd learned to do the same. "Mrs. Vivian," he said when he answered, "what can I do for you?" "I need you to come to a meeting this Saturday, with documentation of everything, the account, the investments, the growth over the past 5 years." "May I ask what this is about?" "I'm ending an experiment." Mr. Garrett chuckled softly. "I wondered when you might. Your husband told me you were one of the smartest people he'd ever known. I'm guessing you learned what you needed to learn." "I did." "Good. I'll be there." Finally, I called Trevor. He answered on the third ring. "Mom?" He sounded surprised, maybe relieved, maybe guilty. "I need to see you," I said. My voice was calm, steady. "Look, about last time. Saturday at 2, you and Claudia. It's important." "What's this about?" "You'll see." "Mom, I don't think—" 2 o'clock, Trevor. Don't be late." I hung up before he could argue. The rest of the week moved slowly. I cleaned my apartment. Not that it needed much cleaning. I ironed my best blouse, a faded blue thing I'd bought at Goodwill 3 years ago. I bought cheap coffee and paper cups. I wanted everything to look exactly as it had for the past 5 years. One last time. Saturday arrived cold and gray. November weather. The kind of day that matches your mood when you're about to do something difficult. At exactly 1:45, there was a knock at my door. Mr. Pemberton and Mr. Garrett stood in the hallway, both in suits, both carrying briefcases. "Gentlemen," I said, "thank you for coming." They entered my tiny apartment, and I saw them both take it in. The worn furniture, the cramped space, the evidence of 5 years of deliberate poverty. Mr. Pemberton shook his head slightly. "You really committed to this, didn't you?" I needed to know the truth. At exactly 2 o'clock, there was another knock. I opened the door. Trevor and Claudia stood there, looking uncomfortable. Trevor was in casual clothes this time, jeans and a sweater, but he still had that look in his eyes, that wariness, that assumption that I'd called him here to apologize or beg for help. Claudia wore her typical expensive casual, designer jeans, cashmere sweater, boots that probably cost $1,000. They looked at Mr. Pemberton and Mr. Garrett sitting in my living room and froze. "Mom, what's going on?" Trevor asked. "Come in, sit down." They filed in slowly. Claudia perched on the edge of my couch like she was afraid it might contaminate her. Trevor stood near the door, arms crossed. "Who are these people?" he asked, gesturing at the 2 men. "This is Mr. Pemberton, your father's lawyer, and this is Mr. Garrett, my financial advisor." Trevor blinked. "Your financial advisor?" "Sit down, Trevor." He sat slowly, next to Claudia. I stood in the middle of my tiny living room and took a deep breath. 5 years ago, I began, your father died, and he left me a letter. In it, he wrote something I didn't understand at first. He said, "Money reveals character, yours and everyone else's." Trevor was staring at me. Claudia was glancing at the 2 men with their briefcases. "I didn't know what he meant," I continued, "so I decided to find out. I decided to see what would happen if people thought I had nothing." "What are you talking about?" Trevor asked. "I sold the house, moved into this apartment, bought a cheap car, lived like I was surviving on my pension alone, and I watched. I paid attention. I wanted to see how people would treat me when they thought I was struggling." Trevor's face was unreadable. Claudia was frowning. "Specifically," I said, looking directly at my son, "I wanted to see how you would treat me." "Mom, I don't—" "Let me finish." My voice was sharp. "For 5 years, I've lived in this apartment. For 5 years, I've listened to you offer to help me. For 5 years, I've watched you look at me with pity, with embarrassment, like I was a problem you needed to solve. Because we thought you were struggling." Trevor stood up. "We were trying to help you. Were you, or were you trying to manage me, get me out of the way? Stop feeling guilty about your poor mother and her dump of an apartment." Trevor's face flushed red. "That's not fair." "Isn't it?" I turned to Mr. Garrett. "Show them." Mr. Garrett opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. He handed it to Trevor. "What is this?" Trevor asked. "Open it." He did. His eyes scanned the first page, then stopped. His face went completely white. "What?" He looked up at me. "What is this?" Claudia leaned over to look. Her mouth fell open. "That," I said calmly, "is the account your father left me. $12 million. The room went silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Trevor stared at the paper, at the numbers, at the detailed account statement showing $12,473,000 and change. This can't be real," he whispered. "It's very real," Mr. Garrett said. "Your father was an exceptional investor. He spent decades building this portfolio. When he passed, he left it entirely to your mother." Claudia stood up, her face red. "You've had $12 million this whole time?" "Yes." "And you let us think you were broke?" "I never said I was broke. You assumed. You lived in this shithole." Claudia's voice was shrill now. "You drove a car that barely ran. You shopped at thrift stores." "I wanted to see who you really were." Trevor was shaking his head, still staring at the account statement. "I don't understand. Why would you do this?" "Because your father was right," I said. "Money reveals character. I needed to know yours." "So this was all a test?" Trevor's voice was rising. "You've been playing games with us for 5 years?" "Not games," I said quietly. "A test, yes. And you failed, Trevor." "Failed? We tried to help you." "Did you?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You called my home a dump. You tried to put me in a nursing home. You visited less and less because being around your struggling mother made you uncomfortable. You looked at me with pity instead of love. You offered me money like I was a charity case instead of your mother. Because we thought you needed help. And that's how you treat someone who needs help? With contempt? With embarrassment? By trying to hide them away in an assisted living facility so you don't have to feel guilty anymore." Claudia was pacing now, her expensive boots clicking on my cheap linoleum floor. "This is insane. You're insane. Do you know how manipulative this is? How cruel." "Cruel?" I turned to her. "You want to talk about cruel? Let's talk about how you stopped coming to visit me after that first year. Let's talk about how you looked at me like I was dirt every time you were forced to come here. Let's talk about how you tried to convince Trevor to put me in a nursing home so you wouldn't have to deal with me anymore. That's not what happened. That's exactly what happened." I looked at Trevor. And you let her. You agreed with her. Your own mother, and you were ready to lock me away because I was inconvenient. Trevor sank back onto the couch, the folder still in his hands. He looked like he'd been slapped. "What happens now?" he asked quietly. "Now," I said, "I'm going to tell you what I've decided to do with the money." They both looked at me, waiting. "Most of it is going to charity," I said. "Organizations that help women escaping domestic violence, scholarships for kids who can't afford college, programs that support the elderly, real support, not warehouses where families dump their inconvenient parents." Claudia's face twisted. "And what about Trevor? What about your own son?" I looked at Trevor, really looked at him. This man I'd given birth to, raised, loved with everything I had, and barely recognized anymore. $500,000, I said. His head snapped up. "What? That's what I'm leaving you in my will, if you earn it." "Earn it?" 5 years of volunteer work, real work, at food banks, homeless shelters, senior centers, places where you'll meet people who actually have nothing. Not people pretending like I was, people who are genuinely struggling. Trevor stared at me. "You want me to volunteer for 5 years?" "Yes, consistently. At least 10 hours a week, documented and verified. You do that for 5 full years, and the $500,000 is yours." "And if I don't?" "Then it goes to charity, too." Claudia let out a harsh, bitter laugh. "This is unbelievable. You're punishing him for caring about you." "He didn't care about me," I said, my voice steady and cold. "He pitied me. There's a difference." "That's not true," Trevor said, but his voice was weak, uncertain. "Isn't it? Tell me, Trevor, when was the last time you visited me just to visit? Not to bring groceries I didn't ask for, not to slip me money I didn't need, not to convince me to move into a nursing home. When was the last time you came here because you wanted to spend time with your mother?" He opened his mouth, closed it, couldn't answer. "That's what I thought." Mr. Pemberton cleared his throat. "Mrs. Vivian, should I explain the legal arrangements?" "Yes." He pulled out another set of documents. "The will has been updated. The majority of the estate, approximately $11 million, will be distributed to various charitable organizations. Upon Mrs. Vivian's death, $500,000 has been set aside in a trust for Trevor, with the conditions his mother outlined. I'll be the trustee overseeing the volunteer work verification." "You can't do this," Claudia said. "I can," I replied. "It's my money, my choice." She turned to Trevor. "Are you going to let her get away with this?" Trevor was still staring at the floor. "Get away with what? It's her money." "She lied to us. She manipulated us." "No," Trevor said quietly. "She showed us who we really are." Claudia's face went red. "I can't believe you're taking her side." "I'm not taking anyone's side." He looked up at me, and for the first time in 5 years, I saw something in his eyes besides pity or obligation. It looked like shame. "She's right. About everything." "Trevor, we were awful, Claudia. We treated her like a burden, like an embarrassment. I called her home a dump. I tried to put her in a nursing home. What kind of son does that? The kind whose mother pretends to be poor. She shouldn't have had to pretend anything." His voice rose. "We should have treated her with respect, whether she was rich or poor. That's the point. That's what she was trying to show us." Claudia grabbed her purse. "I'm not listening to this. This is insane. You're both insane." She stormed toward the door, then stopped and turned back to me. "You know what? You deserve to be alone. You want to play games? Fine. But don't come crying to us when you're actually old and actually need help." She slammed the door behind her. The silence that followed was deafening. Trevor sat on my couch, his head in his hands. Mr. Pemberton and Mr. Garrett exchanged glances, then quietly stood. "We should go," Mr. Pemberton said. "Mrs. Vivian, call me if you need anything." They left, closing the door softly behind them. It was just Trevor and me now. My son and I, alone in my tiny apartment with $12 million worth of truth sitting between us. "I'm sorry," he finally said. His voice was broken. "I'm so sorry, Mom." I sat down in the chair across from him. "What are you sorry for?" "All of it. Everything. The way I treated you. The things I said. The assumptions I made." He looked up and his eyes were wet. "I failed, didn't I? Dad's test. I failed." "Yes." He nodded slowly. "I deserve that. I deserve all of this." "Do you understand why I did it?" "I think so." He wiped his eyes. "You needed to know if I'd love you without the money, if I'd respect you when I thought you had nothing. And I didn't. I looked at you and saw a problem. Someone to fix. Someone to manage. Not my mother." "When did that happen?" I asked. "When did I stop being your mother and become a burden?" He thought for a long time. "I don't know. Maybe when Dad died. Maybe before that. Claudia and I, we got so caught up in our lives, our careers, our apartment, our things. And you were this reminder of, I don't know, simplicity, poverty, everything we were trying to rise above. I was never poor, Trevor. I know that now, but in my head you were, and it embarrassed me. God, Mom, that's so awful to say out loud, but it's true. I was embarrassed by you. Why? Because Claudia's parents are rich. They have a mansion in Connecticut. They take European vacations, they drive luxury cars. And my mom was living in a one-bedroom apartment with garage sale furniture. It made me feel less than. Less than what? Less than Claudia. Less than her family. Less successful. I leaned back in my chair. So my worth was tied to how I made you look. Yes, and that's horrible. I know it's horrible, but it's the truth. At least he was being honest now. What happens now? He asked. That depends on you. The volunteer work. You're serious about that? Completely serious. 5 years, Trevor. 10 hours a week minimum. Food banks, homeless shelters, senior centers, places where you'll see real struggle, real poverty, real people who need help. And if I do it, then you'll get the money. And more importantly, you'll understand what your father was trying to teach us. That character matters more than wealth. That how we treat people when they have nothing reveals who we really are. He nodded slowly. And if I don't do it, then you prove I was right about you. That you only care about money. That you can't be bothered to help people unless there's something in it for you. That's not who I want to be. Then don't be. He stood up. I should go. Claudia's probably already packing her things. You think she'll leave you? I know she will. The moment she found out I wasn't getting millions of dollars immediately, she was done. I saw it in her eyes. I'm sorry. Don't be. You did me a favor. Better to know now than later. He walked to the door, then stopped. Mom? Yes? Did you ever actually need help these past 5 years? No, I never needed help, but I needed to know if you'd love me anyway. He nodded, his hand on the doorknob. I do love you. I know I didn't show it. I know I failed your test, but I love you. I know you do, in your way. I'm going to do it, he said. The volunteer work, not for the money, for me. Because I need to understand what you were trying to show me. Good. He left, and I sat alone in my tiny apartment, surrounded by my thrift store furniture, with $12 million in a bank account I'd barely touched. And I cried. But this time, they weren't tears of sadness or disappointment. They were tears of relief. The test was over. The truth was out. And whatever happened next, at least it would be real. The weeks that followed were strange. I didn't hear from Trevor. Didn't hear from Claudia. Didn't hear from anyone. I went about my life, still lived in my small apartment, still drove my old car, still shopped at discount stores, not because I had to anymore, but because I'd learned something important in those 5 years. I didn't need much to be happy. The big house hadn't made me happy. Harold had made me happy. The expensive things hadn't mattered. The simple life had mattered. And now, with $12 million sitting in an account, I realized something. I didn't want to change my life. I liked my small apartment. I liked my routine. I liked the quiet simplicity. Maybe I'd travel someday. Maybe I'd donate more to charity. Maybe I'd do something meaningful with the money. But I didn't need to prove anything to anyone anymore. 2 months after the confrontation, I got a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. Mrs. Vivian, this is Pauline Reynolds from Riverside Community Kitchen. Hello? I'm calling because we had a new volunteer start with us this week, and he listed you as a reference. Trevor Wells? He said he's your son. My heart stopped. He did? Yes, ma'am. He came in on Tuesday evening and Thursday evening this week. Helped serve meals, cleaned up, talked to some of our regulars. He's already scheduled for Saturday morning, too. I couldn't speak. I just wanted to confirm that you support his volunteer work here, Pauline continued. It's our policy to check references. I support it, I managed. Completely. Wonderful. He seems like a good young man. A bit overwhelmed at first, but aren't we all? He'll get the hang of it. After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table and cried. Not sad tears, happy tears. Trevor was actually doing it. 3 months later, Trevor called me. Hi, Mom. Hi. Silence. Awkward. Heavy. I've been volunteering, he said. At the community kitchen, and at a food bank, and I'm starting at a senior center next week. I heard. Claudia left me, he said. His voice was flat, matter of fact. Moved out the week after. Everything. She said I was insane, that you manipulated me, that I should fight the will, get a lawyer, take you to court. I'm sorry. Don't be. She was right about one thing. I was insane. Just not the way she meant it. I was insane to think that success was measured in apartment square footage and car brands. Insane to think that my mother's worth was tied to her bank account. Trevor, let me finish, please. He took a breath. I've been working at the community kitchen for 3 months now. And I've met people, Mom, real people. People who are trying so hard just to survive. Single mothers working 3 jobs. Veterans with PTSD who can't hold down work. Elderly people whose families abandon them. His voice cracked. And I see myself in the people who come in to volunteer for an hour, take some selfies for Instagram, and never come back. The people who want to feel good about themselves without actually doing the hard work. That was me. That's who I was. Was? I'm trying not to be that person anymore. That's all I wanted, I said softly. Can I come see you? He asked. Not to talk about money, Not to apologize again, just to see ya, my mom. Yes. He came the following Saturday. He arrived at my apartment in jeans and a t-shirt. No suit, no expensive watch. He looked tired, older. But something in his eyes was different, softer, more open. We sat in my tiny kitchen. I made coffee. We didn't talk about the money or the test or the past 5 years. We talked about his volunteer work, about a woman named Rosa who came to the community kitchen every Tuesday with her 3 kids, about a veteran named Charlie who told Trevor stories about Vietnam, about an elderly man named Mr. Peterson, who'd been abandoned by his family and now lived alone in a studio apartment smaller than mine. Mr. Peterson reminds me of how I saw you, Trevor said, like a problem, a burden, something to be managed, and now I see him, really see him, and he's just a person with stories and dignity and worth, and I'm ashamed of how I treated you. You're learning, I said. That's what matters. I'm not doing this for the money, he said. I need you to know that. I'm doing it because I need to understand. I need to become someone better, someone Dad would be proud of. He would be proud of you now. I hope so. Trevor kept coming. Every Saturday we'd have coffee, talk. He'd tell me about his week, about the people he met, about the things he was learning. Slowly, over months, I watched him change. Not overnight, not dramatically, but in small, important ways. He started listening more, judging less, seeing people instead of problems. One Saturday, about 8 months after the confrontation, he said something that made me cry. I get it now. What Dad meant. What you were trying to show me. And what's that? That who we are, when people have nothing, when there's nothing to gain, no benefit to us, that's who we really are. Our character. I reached across the table and took his hand. I'm proud of you. He squeezed back, tears in his eyes. I'm trying, Mom. Every day I'm trying to be better. That's all any of us can do. A year and a half after the confrontation, on a sunny Tuesday afternoon, Trevor called me with news. Mom, I wanted you to hear it from me first. I'm getting married. My heart skipped. To Claudia. God, no. Claudia's long gone. She's engaged to some real estate mogul now. No, I'm marrying someone I met at the senior center. Her name is Jen. She's a social worker. Tell me about her. She's nothing like Claudia. She drives a beat-up Toyota, lives in a small apartment, spends her weekends volunteering. She doesn't care about money or status or any of that stuff. She just cares about people. She sounds wonderful. She is. And Mom, she wants to meet you, the real you, not the test version. She knows everything. About the money, about what I did, about who I was, and she still wants to marry me, God knows why. Because you're becoming someone worth knowing. I hope so. I met Jen the following weekend. She was warm, genuine, unpretentious. She looked at my apartment without judgment. She asked me about my life, my interests, Harold. She saw me as a person, not a bank account or a burden, and I saw the way Trevor looked at her, with respect, with real love, not the performance of love, but the real thing. 2 years after the confrontation, Trevor completed his volunteer requirement. He'd logged over 1,000 hours, far more than the minimum. Mr. Pemberton called me to verify. He exceeded expectations, he said. By a lot. He's still volunteering, even though he's met the requirement. Says he can't imagine stopping. Good. So the $500,000 will be released to him? I thought about it for a long moment. Yes, but not all at once. Set it up as an annuity, $50,000 a year for 10 years. Any particular reason? Because I don't want him to stop being the person he's become, and large sums of money have a way of changing people. Understood. When I told Trevor, he just laughed. I don't care about the money anymore, Mom, but thank you. What will you do with it? Probably donate most of it. Maybe keep some for Jen and me to buy a small house. Nothing fancy, just something that's ours. Your father would be so proud of you. I hope I'm becoming someone worth being proud of. You are. I'm 68 years old. I live in a small apartment with thrift store furniture and a car that barely runs. I have $12 million I'll probably never spend, but I also have something more valuable than that. I have my son back, not the polished, successful, shallow version who treated me like a burden, the real version, the one who learned that character matters more than wealth, that how we treat people reveals who we really are, that love isn't about what people have, it's about who they are. Harold was right. Money does reveal character, but so does the lack of it. And sometimes, the greatest gift you can give someone is the chance to fail and the opportunity to become someone better. Trevor married Jen last month. Small ceremony, just close friends and family, no expensive venue, no designer dress, just love. At the reception, Trevor gave a toast. My father once wrote a letter to my mother. In it, he said, "Money reveals character." For years, I didn't understand what that meant, but my mother did. She taught me the hardest lesson I've ever learned. She showed me who I really was, and then she gave me the chance to become someone better. He looked at me across the room. Thank you, Mom, for not giving up on me, for believing I could change, for loving me enough to let me fail. Everyone applauded, but I just smiled, because that's what parents do. We love our children enough to let them fail, to let them struggle, to let them become who they're meant to be, even when it breaks our hearts to watch. Harold's letter sits in my nightstand drawer. I read it sometimes, usually late at night when I can't sleep. The last line always makes me cry. You'll learn more about the people in your life in the next year than you learned in the last 40. He was right about that, too. I learned that people reveal themselves not in grand gestures, but in small moments, in assumptions and judgments, in how they talk about you when they think you're not listening, in whether they see you as a person or a problem. I learned that poverty, real or performed, is a mirror. It shows people's true faces. I learned that my son was capable of both cruelty and growth, that he could fail spectacularly and still become someone worth knowing. And I learned that Harold's greatest gift wasn't the $12 million. It was the wisdom to use it as a test, to see clearly, to understand deeply, to know the truth, even when the truth hurt, especially when the truth hurt, because sometimes the most loving thing you can do is show someone who they really are and give them the chance to become someone better. What would you do if this happened to you? Tell me in the comments. I always read them. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more true life stories like mine.